get a master's in social work. At that time, I was not thinking about going back to school. I was over it. School is very challenging, especially undergraduate degrees. So I took her up on it and I applied, on a whim just to see if I would get in. I got into two schools, University of South Carolina and Howard University. Decided to go to Howard, so I moved up here from South Carolina, which was scary.
Yeah, it was probably a hard decision, huh?
Yeah, going from a small town to a big city. But once I got here, I got comfortable and acclimated to the area and started moving around. And it was one of the best decisions of my life because here doing social work versus South Carolina is very different. A lot of the problems that people face here are very complex due to the fact that it's an urban area, it's a city. So I was able to get a taste of various different aspects of social work working here. So went to Howard, obtained my master's of social work degree. Then from there, I worked at a couple of places in the area in different fields of social work. So I started off in a group home. I started off pretty small, interned and worked full time while going to school full time at a group home. I loved it because not only did I get to work with teenagers, but I got to see the aspect that the social workers that case carry don't really see. So I got to see how the kids interacted with their families on visits. I got to see how the kids felt about being in foster care on a day-to-day basis during the nighttime, during the day. Whereas, when you're a case carrying social worker, you just see them for maybe 2 or 3 times out of the month. But when you're actually working in their environment that they live in, it's a different experience. A lot of the kids told me, how they felt about being in foster care. They were very candid about that in the group home. So I enjoyed that. From there, I worked at a mental health facility where most of the patients came on a appointment basis. So they came to see maybe the psychiatrist or their therapist. And I was a community support worker at that place and also a treatment plan writer. So what a treatment plan writer does is basically they look at what the diagnosis is from the psychologist or psychiatrist. And then from there, they write up what they think the treatment should look like. So maybe they want the person to take their medications as prescribed. Maybe they want the person to attend therapy once or twice a week. Maybe they want the person to get some additional support or resources, substance abuse treatment for one, or maybe they need to get medical treatment. Maybe they mentioned in their evaluation that they have some type of health condition. So I enjoyed being a treatment plan writer, and I got to work from home, which now we're working from home. Well, really everyone's kind of working from home, but that was kind of unique to me at that time because most people were not working from home that were social workers. So enjoyed that. Then from there, I worked at various foster care agencies. So I worked for the state as well as some of the smaller nonprofit foster care agencies. Love that. And that's basically case carrying social work, where you get a number of cases. You work with the entire family, the parents, the kids' attorneys, the parents' attorneys, and you try to reunify, meaning send the child back home, which was very rewarding. I had several cases where adoption was achieved, reunification was achieved. I've even worked with some kids that were refugees. So I just had some unique experiences, different cultures, cultural backgrounds. So from there, my last place that I worked was in licensing. So I licensed foster parents. And that means going into their homes, interacting with them, getting to know them, writing what's called a home study, which is an evaluation of them. It says who's in the home. It talks about, their background. You have to ask really personal questions. You get to see their home, and you write up an evaluation to say whether they're a fit person to be a foster parent. And then you gather information, personal information about them. They might have to do a background check. They might have to give you some of their personal documents, social security numbers, birthday, things of that nature. And then once they're licensed, then we find a child that's a good fit for them and place children in their home. So,
Great.
And I ended there.
Okay. That sounds, the licensing process sounds very complex. So on average, would that be a weeks long process, a months long process, or can you kind of give like a ballpark figure for how long something like that would take for a foster parent to get vetted?
It really depends on the foster parent. There's some foster parents who are very aggressive about getting things completed, but it could take about 3 to 6 months to get all the documents turned in and get them licensed. And then once we get all the documents in, we have to go to the state and turn those in and then get them approved to be licensed in the state.
Right. Okay. So it seems like a lot of your work kind of focuses around 18 and under. Would you say that's the predominant age group that social workers focus on? And also, when you go to school, do you kind of choose that focus? Or is it more of like when you get into the workforce, you kind of figure out what needs that demand?
When you're in school, you're basically trained to deal with all different types of populations. It could be mental health, it could be foster care, it could be school social work, hospital social work. You get more of like a generalist, I guess, view of everything that's going on. And then from there, you kind of decide which direction you want to go in at the bachelor's level. So when you're getting your bachelor's degree, you're well-rounded. When you get to the graduate school level or the master's degree level, you start to not only get a generalist view of everything, but you start to find your focus. So when there's elective courses, you might choose to take more mental health courses. Or if you are thinking you want to work with seniors, you might go the geriatric route. Or if you're thinking of working in schools, same thing, you choose classes that are focused on that. Or if you don't know at the time, it's okay. You can just take which classes you think you would be interested in. And then when you get to the internship, you can really decide where you think you would thrive. I've had friends work in schools as interns, friends work in hospitals. I've had friends work for nonprofit agencies, shelters, battered women's shelters, homeless shelters. The list goes on and on. So it's really up to you how you structure your education.
Right. And you said you went to school, but you may have mentioned your majors, but forgive me if I missed them. What were your majors in college once again, Shannon?
Well, I did a mental health focus, even though most of my my work history has to do with foster care. I really enjoyed foster care for some reason. I think it's because you get a variety of different experiences. So when you're working in foster care, you work with kids who have to see a therapist or go to a mental health clinic, or some kids who have to be placed in psychiatric hospitals, even out of the state. So I've traveled to different states to take kids to psychiatric facilities and place them there. Florida, South Carolina. I haven't been to Utah, but some of my colleagues have been to ones in Utah, North Carolina. So if a kid is really having mental health issues where they need psychiatric treatment, they may have to be placed out of the state in those facilities, and you have to travel with them, check them in. You have to take their parents to go see them every so often. So you get that aspect.
Right.
And then if kids get sick, there's been times where I've had to leave my home in the middle of the night to go on emergency calls to take them to the hospital. Maybe they were suicidal. Maybe they were having a psychiatric episode. So it gave me the feel of, hey, I get to go to the hospital and talk with medical social workers and then get their perspective, which is a little bit different from foster care. Then I was able to work with the court system. So I got the legal aspect of social work. There's also some social workers that work directly for the court system. And they could be working with juveniles, or they could be working, with families with regard to foster care. It just depends.
Right. So it's not a 9 to 5 job, and you have to kind of be on call to, answer emergencies and operate even outside of the state, which is kind of eye-opening. It's not something that I didn't realize that the social workers were, it's like you're the first line of defense for these kids. So you're like the go-to, the trustworthy source of information, the professional, the friend, all kind of piled up into one. It's pretty amazing to hear, Shannon.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary job. You get a whole lot more skills than you anticipate to get while doing it. And the traveling, is an added bonus, even though you're not taking the kid to the necessarily the most happiest place that they want to go, but you get to travel and also see how things are done in different states. There's also different rules in different jurisdictions with regard to social work. So I got to see that as well.
Right. And I'm sure the relationship that is formed between the child and the social worker is a very unique, special relationship. And you would probably hear things that their parents wouldn't hear, their friends or their brothers and sisters wouldn't hear. So it's like you're their confidant as well.
Yes. Very much so.
Yep. You mentioned all the various skills that you've kind of accumulated throughout your time as a social worker. So can you talk about the amount of time that you were a social worker and kind of what brought you into the library system? And are there skill sets that kind of you have formed from your previous career that have aided you in your career right now as a public librarian?
Yes. So I started out being a social worker around 2003, 2004. And then I transitioned to being a librarian within the past 3 years. Went to Syracuse University online and got my master's degree in librarianship. And I've had to use several skills that I didn't think I would have to use as a librarian. As a librarian for my social work career. Yeah. There have been times where there might be a crisis that happens in the library and, I have to use my conflict management skills. Or, customer service is basically conflict management. When a customer has an issue, you have to be able to respond to them, be respectful, hear them out, and make sure that they get their needs met. Another thing is self-care. I didn't realize that librarians need to hear that they need self-care and that they need to take time away from work, because a lot of us love to read, or we love to do things that have to do with the library, look for resources, but there's some things we need to do for ourselves too, so that we can be our best self at work. And so as a social worker, that was one of the biggest things that our biggest skill that I walked away with is self-care, taking care of myself, and working with people. There are all various different types of people that come into the library from different backgrounds, and being able to communicate with them and meet their needs where they are is one of the hugest ones that I took away. As a social worker, we do a lot of what's called assessment. Mm-hmm. So that means asking questions and thinking critically in order to figure out what the issue is, or to identify the problem so that you can come up with a solution. That happens a lot as a librarian. At the reference desk, someone may be coming in and you may think they're looking for a book, but they're actually looking for a digital resource. Or they may think they remember the title of the book, but they may just remember what the cover of the book looks like. So you have to be able to ask questions and kind of try to understand really what they're looking for. And that's the same thing in social work. We're asking a lot of questions. We're being a good listener. And we're coming up with solutions to their problems. So it's similar in a lot of ways that I didn't think, initially. At first I thought, hey, I'll be in the library. I'll be around books. I love books. People will just be asking me about books. But most of the time when people come into the library, they're asking about resources. They want to know what's available in the county. They want to improve their life. A lot of the things that we're doing now, which I love, is we're doing virtual programs that have to deal with life skills, getting, today, finding a career or determining what career you want. Also, employment resources with figuring out how to write a resume or cover letter. We're also talking about mental health. With it being Mental Health Awareness Month, we're doing different series about, trying to help parents who are dealing with their kids during COVID or dealing with their kids' mental health as well as their own mental health. So it's similar in a lot of ways. So I'm grateful for the skills that I obtained as a social worker, and I'm constantly using them on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. I want to touch just real quick on 2 points you made. One of them kind of talks about the martyr syndrome, about these people in these very altruistic professions like social workers or teachers, for instance, or libraries. You had mentioned that self-care is super important, and we have to remind those people who we manage to take care of themselves. But I was in the educational field for a number of years, and I saw that same phenomenon. It's just the whole idea of, we're doing a positive service for the public, so let's keep doing it until we can't do it anymore, which I think leads to much quicker burnout. And we talked a little bit ago before the program about burnout and its effect on the industry of education and social workers as well. So is that something that you saw firsthand? Did you see young people coming in, ready to go in this new program, and then once they got a degree, it kind of, their eyes got wide, and did you see an effect of folks burning out too quickly in your industry?
Yes, very much so. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's one of the biggest challenges of being a social worker, is trying to manage burnout. And what burnout essentially is when you feel like so much is on you, so much stress, so much trauma you see every day, that you feel like going to work is more of a pain than, something that brings, that you're not bringing as much to the table as you were before. So you feel drained, you might feel unable to cope, tired, you might have physical issues going on, such as headaches, stomach aches. I've seen some social workers who were vegans, and they actually had high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and they've never had those issues before. Some social workers who have chronic illness now, and they've never had any issues before. They exercise frequently, they eat healthy, and they now have a chronic illness as a result of the stress that they had to face every day. Usually burnout can happen really at any time, but most of the time in my career, I've seen it happen probably at around the 4 or 5 year mark of doing this type of work. When you first get out of school, you're very eager. You want to help everybody you can help. You want to do everything you can do. And sometimes you don't set the limits, or you don't talk to your supervisor about that you're tired, and that you need more support. And so you start to, as a social worker, we had to carry cell phones and a laptop. So you hear your cell phone going off, and you're like, freaking out. You don't want to answer it. It causes you stress to hear the ring. And then sometimes taking work home. So a lot of jobs, you go 9 to 5. When you get home, 5:30, 6 o'clock, you can relax, do whatever you want. But as a social worker, you take your laptop home, you take your cell phone home, your work cell phone, and sometimes you still get emails at night, or you still get phone calls, and it's like you can never turn it off. So with burnout, I think setting those boundaries ahead of time, saying my work schedule is this time to this time, and I'm only going to be available, this extra time for true emergencies. Not saying, okay, I'm just available because, I see this email coming in, let me just answer it real quick. Or I see this phone call coming in, let me just answer it real quick. Setting boundaries is one of the biggest things. And then also setting boundaries with your clients. Sometimes they think social workers should be available to them 24/7 all the time, no matter if it's an emergency or not. but really defining for them, hey, this is what an emergency is. If you have a health concern and you need to be rushed to the hospital, that's an emergency. Or if, like, we have several kids that run away, and if they're ready to come back from being where they are, and or they're unsafe where they are, that's an emergency. But really defining that for your clients was one of the biggest things that was a challenge for me and for my colleagues. Another thing with burnout is that social workers do not themselves like to go see a therapist. It's important, just to even have that listening ear. Not that you're, saying or labeling yourself as being crazy. Sometimes just having somebody hear the challenges that you face every day, or just getting it out there on the table with a mental health professional who understands the type of challenges you face, is therapeutic. It makes you feel better. It helps you cope and deal with other things. A therapist will help you kind of see what you're seeing from a different perspective, so that you can face it a little bit easier, when you return to work. But a lot of social workers, they don't want to see a therapist, but it is very important that early on, if you do decide to do this work, that you get one, so that you can just have someone to talk out, the challenges you face as a social worker. Another issue that social workers face is secondary trauma. And that means that, they've been exposed to people who have trauma or who have traumatic experiences. So then they themselves feel that trauma. So by reading cases where kids have been harmed or hurt, that has an effect on you. It has effect on your mental state, your brain, everything. Also, it can cause you to feel tired, emotionally drained, to have to read that. Social workers are reading a lot of the times things that other social workers have wrote, or issues that have happened with a client in the past. So I had a case one time where a kid experienced things that a kid should never experience. And after I read that case, all I could think about was that case. I'd go to sleep thinking about it. I'd wake up thinking about it. When I talk to the kid, I'd think about it. Or if I came in contact with another kid of the same age, that would be a trigger for me to think about that case. So secondary trauma is basically you are experiencing some of the symptoms, that your clients have experienced just by reading or being exposed to their traumatic experience. So seeing a therapist is number one that you can do. Second thing, exercise. Taking a walk. It doesn't have to be a rigorous exercise, or doing something fun, going dancing, or hanging out with friends, going to dinner. We did a lot of that as social workers, going out to dinner. And laughter, that was one of the biggest things that I think got myself and my colleagues through, is we would make crazy jokes. Sometimes it would be inside jokes that only we knew about. But just having that time to laugh and enjoy each other, because we were all facing the same things. And then having like colleagues that you can talk to, outside of work about different cases or challenges you face was also good. So forming a relationship with your colleagues.
Right. And I'm sure talking with your colleagues about not work stuff too at times is very important, because it's good to have professional relationships, but it's also important to know the people that you work with outside of your, particular job, I would think.
Yes, very, very, very important. I've seen, some of my colleagues take trips together, or some of them go to dinner or do various activities together, celebrate birthdays. So, you become very close to your colleagues in this type of profession, because you're dealing with people's emotions and feelings and thoughts, which is quite different from just, going to work, doing your, daily tasks that don't involve people's emotions. Feelings. Very different.
Right.
Self-care. I mean, even if you're going into a social work program, having your self-care regimen already started is good. Eating healthy, exercising, having time with friends, having boundaries set is good going in. I didn't have my self-care regimen going in, so if I had that, I would have felt better, in the profession as a whole.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned the fact that it's definitely it could be traumatic if people don't kind of learn how to compartmentalize that information for themselves. So do you see the industry changing? I mean, obviously everything's changing, but how has the social work industry changed so far in the past couple months in the face of COVID? And are we seeing like an increased demand? Like, do we see the workforce getting bigger? Are there going to be more people getting recruited into the field, do you think? And just kind of like, what are your thoughts on what's going on right now?
Yes. The field is getting larger as far as the demand for social workers for several reasons. Number one, this is a pandemic, something we haven't experienced before. So it's affecting us in ways that we never imagined it would affect us. There's also healthcare workers that are seeing things and feeling and experiencing things they've never felt before. So I know social workers are going to have to be there to provide some type of mental health care to them, whether it be counseling or therapy or just ways for them to be able to cope with what they see every day. There will also be a need for careers. Social workers do help with career coaching, or they identify resources to support someone who's trying to get a job. And the unemployment rate is sky high right now, not only here in this area in PG County, but throughout the entire United States. So I'm pretty sure social workers will be pulled in to assist with that aspect because, as a social worker, you already have that resource if you're working with children and families. But there's going to be an aggressive need for that as we move forward. Right now, a lot of my friends that are therapists are licensed clinical social workers, and they provide therapy, are doing therapy remotely. So they're having to be on the computer talking to their clients. They can't have that face-to-face contact that they've had before. So they're having to do things over the computer. I know EPA, some social workers are therapists through EPA. And so I know those numbers are jumping up because people who are working from home are having other challenges that they never thought they would have before. They have to be a caregiver. They have to do their work on the computer. They have to manage their time. They have to homeschool their kids. They may have a relative or a friend who became infected with COVID. So that introduces another element. The grief and loss aspect that was in hospitals before, where people could go to the hospital and be with their loved ones at the end and prepare for that, is not happening. So social workers are having to figure out how to talk with families through that process remotely. And before, having anything with regard to remote contact to your clients was something that wasn't very common a couple years ago. So having to work with your clients remotely is very new. There's several confidentiality things that social workers have to keep in mind when they're communicating over the internet, privacy issues. So they've had a lot of the social workers now have had to quickly work through that process so that they could still have contact with their clients, which brings me to licensing. So social workers have to be licensed. So if you go to school for a bachelor's degree, you have to take an exam. And once you take the exam, then you can become licensed. You have to pay a fee. So I've written down some information because I'm not good at remembering a lot of numbers, just to give you an idea of the cost associated with that. So if you decide, hey, I'm going to school for a bachelor's degree in social work, you have to pay an application fee. So we're just going to take it from the standpoint of Maryland. Each state has a different set of requirements. So just for Maryland only, you have to pay $100 application fee. Once you pay that fee, you're paying that to the the board of social workers in Maryland. Once you pay that fee and they approve you, then you can sit for the exam. The exam is around 4 hours long. And I forget the exact amount of questions that's on the exam. I believe it's 200 questions, and you have to get so many correct. And they're multiple choice. And then the test itself is $230. If you do not pass the exam, you have to wait 90 days before you can take it again. Mm-hmm. And then once you pass that exam, then you can practice social work. In the state of Maryland, you cannot call yourself a social worker or practice social work unless you're licensed. And then if you go for the master's degree, then you sit and you take the exam for the licensed graduate social worker. That exam fee is $260, and you also pay a $100 application fee. And then it's not the same exam, it's an exam on that level. It's 4 hours long as well. If you don't pass it, same thing, you have to wait 90 days to retake it again. And then the clinical license is another exam that you take 2 years after you have had the LGSW license, and you have to sit under somebody who has the clinical license for 2 years. They have to supervise you, meet with you for so many hours, and then you take that exam. That exam is $260 with a $100 application fee, and all of these licenses have to be renewed every 2 years. And you have to pay fees for that, which can be expensive. During the time that you're trying to renew your license, you have to get what's called CEU hours, or continuing education units. And you have to get about between, I think it's 40 hours, 30 to 40 hours of continuing education credits in order to be relicensed and pay a whole extra fee. And then the continuing education credit classes can be expensive. So, hopefully you're working for an agency or a company that will pay for those classes or even offer those classes to you while you're a social worker. So there's a lot of costs and fees associated with being a social worker.
Yeah, it's quite a complex industry. So you're talking about licensing. Are licensing and certification the same? It sounds like maybe licensing happens at the base level, and then you can get additional certifications to kind of move up. Is that how it goes?
So it's 3 different levels. Mm-hmm. Well, actually 4 levels. It is the licensed bachelor social work, which is just a license. You have a license to be a social worker. Then there's the licensed graduate social worker, which is the master's levels, just the license to practice. Then at the clinical level, there's two sides to it. The first side is the licensed clinical social worker, where you just take the exam and you're a clinical social worker. To be a licensed clinical social worker that is certified, you actually have to do a little bit more when you get your certification. So you have to give the board a little bit more hours of supervision and clinical face-to-face hours with clients, and then you take the exam. So it's basically more of experience that distinguishes the two. But the certification allows you to supervise someone at the graduate level who is trying to get the clinical license. Not everybody is going to be considered able to give that supervision in order for you to get the clinical license. So in order to get the clinical license, you have to be supervised by a certified clinical social worker.
Okay, interesting. So we just got a question from the audience, and audience, your cue. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask us either on Crowdcast or Facebook, and we'll make sure Shannon gets to the questions. So Shannon, the question is, have you ever had an experience with transference or malingering from a client?
Trying to think over the years. Yes, transference and countertransference. Basically, those are when a client kind of sees something in you and treats you in a way that they would treat that person, but you're not that person, or vice versa. You may see something in a client that makes you treat them differently. And yes, that has happened several times. I think that's like a natural thing for people to do. People remind different things that people do, remind them of other people that they've had in contact in their life. And basically, what I do is try to talk to the client about that, maybe ask them some questions or do an assessment, as I've said before, to try to work through those issues. When it happens with me as the worker, if I see something in them that's triggering for me, then I go to my supervisor, have conversations with my supervisor. She may give me tips on how to cope with it or deal with it, or it may be a conversation where this may not be the right fit for me as far as a client is concerned, and the client may need to work with a different worker. What we try to do is do what's best for the client overall. Malingering, not really, haven't really dealt with that, no.
Can you explain that concept for those who are unfamiliar?
Let me look up the exact wording, because I don't want to tell someone.
I just see exaggerate or feigning an illness in order to escape work or some kind
of. Not really.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Gotcha. Also, a question just is coming in from Yolanda. Yolanda, thanks for joining us. You're one of our most loyal viewers. How long were the internships that you had, and what were were those duties different than those that you had after you finished the internship? And this is a perfect question because we're going to start talking about the youth and volunteer opportunities and how folks can get involved into the industry. So what went on with your internships?
Basically, some internships were, I'm trying to remember because this has been years ago. Some internships were a year. I believe when I was in my master's program, we had 2 internships, both a year long. And then in undergrad, we had 1 internship that was a year long. The first one for the bachelor's degree was in a foster care agency, Department of Social Services in my hometown. They had me doing home studies. So I would go to different homes and write a study on the home, which is similar to what I was talking about when you license a foster parent. But home studies can also be done on biological parents. So when I was in South Carolina, it was on the biological parent, and I would give that to the court. So the court would determine if this was a stable and fit home for the child to return to. And then in DC, when I did my internships, I was at a group home first for my first internship for the first year, which was awesome. And then I worked for a mental health agency. I was a treatment plan writer there, and I was also the community support worker. So the community support worker was counted as my internship, and the treatment plan writer was counted as my full-time job.
Okay, interesting. So we'll answer Nick's question. Nicholas from Facebook says, "Hi Shannon, how do you view librarianship and social work as being similar?" I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but what's your summary of how librarianship and social work is closely related?
It's closely related in that you are in a helper profession. You're trying to help people or individuals get their needs met. In a social work environment, it more so has to do with aspects of their life. So maybe they need mental health services. Maybe they need educational services. Maybe they need career services. So, you're dealing with various aspects of their life. Oftentimes it has to do with if there's a problem that has arisen. So maybe they lost their children because they were unable to provide for them. So their children were taken by Child Protective Services. And so you're trying to get the kids back to them, but in order to get the kids back, they need to fix different aspects of their life. Maybe they need housing. Maybe they need a job. Maybe they need running water or just food resources. So basically you're connecting people to resources that have to do with social issues or problems in their life. Librarianship, most of the time people they're also coming for resources, but more so resources that can easily be tangible to them, or you can easily answer the question within maybe the first contact that you have with them when they come to the library. Whereas as a social worker, you're dealing with the client on an ongoing basis for several months, even years, to try to answer their questions or get their needs met. It's similar in that you're helping people reach a solution to a problem or an issue. And in libraries now, we're seeing some people come to the library as the last resort. Maybe they've worked with a social worker or they've worked with a social service institution and they didn't get their needs met. So they're just, aimlessly just wondering. And so they may come to the library because we're an open door. We accept everybody. We're not there for them to come and we're not there to kind of put pressure on them to meet a certain goal. Whereas as a social worker, you're almost pressuring them a little bit to try to get to where they need to be because you're constantly talking to them, constantly working with them. More so in the library, they're coming because they like being in that environment. They like that space. Maybe they're coming to meet with other individuals that they know, or maybe that's just the place that they come to just use the computer or relax and read a book. So they're coming for a different reason.
Right. So two very similar industries. And interestingly, in the past few years, we've kind of seen a bit of intersection with libraries and social workers. We know for a fact that Baltimore and DC Public Library, they do a great job of incorporating social workers into the library. And I believe they even have some on staff, or they have a partnership with companies that kind of bring social workers into the library. So can you speak a bit to the future of Prince George's County Memorial Library System and our plans to kind of tie in social workers?
I know about a year ago, we were talking about maybe having an intern. So, there's various universities in the area who offer social work programs. So we were going to look to try to get one of those students to come in and work with me initially because, I am a social worker. But when the pandemic happened, that kind of took a halt. So we're looking now, I think, more so of should we hire a social worker full time, or should we go in the direction that some of the libraries in the area have done and have a team of social workers? Because there's going to be an increased demand or need for social service overall with regard to people coming to the library and asking questions about how can I find a job, or do you have employment assistance? Do you know where jobs are available right now since we're still dealing with the pandemic? There's going to be people who need food resources. So they're going to want to know where are the food pantries are, or they may need housing. Maybe we need to figure out shelters in the area, or maybe have someone come to the library to speak to them about that. I know we have worked over this past year or two with the Department of Social Services in PG County, and we've had someone come on a weekly basis to work with people in the community who are experiencing homelessness or who need assistance with housing. And so it has allowed several customers that come in not to feel pressure to talk to that person, but just to know that person is there in the library on a weekly basis to talk to them, to answer questions, or to meet with them, which has been amazing. I've had several people in the branch that I work in, speak with the social workers. Some of them may not have housing needs, but they have other resource needs, and the social workers were able to connect them with those resources. For example, when you are experiencing homelessness, you don't, in PG County, in order to get certain access to resources, you have to have an ID. So several customers have come in without an ID, but having that PG County social worker in there, they were able to figure out a way to get them the ID. In order to get an ID, you have to have an address. So if they're experiencing homelessness or a transition with housing, they may not necessarily have an address to have their ID mailed to. So the PG County social worker was able to figure out a way to work with them to get those needs met, which is awesome.
Right. Okay, well, let's jump into a little bit of what young people can do to get involved. You talked a little bit about your internship and kind of what you did in the early parts of your career, but how can folks get involved in volunteer opportunities for, those folks who are either thinking of the industry or if they're maybe starting out in college?
So you can Google various nonprofit organizations. Maybe there's a shelter in your area. Maybe there's a food pantry in your area that you can get in contact with. Then also, right now with COVID going on, I just came across a volunteer opportunity called Maryland Responders, where you can sign up if you are 18 years or older and be an emergency response person during any type of emergency that happens in Maryland. You don't have to be available 24 hours a day. It's just they may contact you and ask you if you're available. You can respond if you are. If you're not available, you don't have to respond. There's another one in DC. I can't remember the exact name of what they're calling their organization, but it's similar to the one in Maryland, where they will contact you to be a part of this. Now, if you are a mental health professional now, or you're a retired mental health professional or a student in that profession, you can certainly be a part of that organization or sign up for it. And then the next resource is the National Association of Social Workers. You can be a student member, or you can be a member, professional member, meaning you're already in the field working and you pay your fee. You can go to the various conferences that they offer. And then once you sign up, they'll ask you what local chapter you want to be a part of. PG County has one. And they will send you their newsletter every month. It can give you information on different CEUs that we talked about earlier, which is classes that you can take. It gives you information on how the field is changing with regard to licenses. There's even a section in there that's not a very great section, but it tells all the people in the area that maybe their license has expired or is under investigation, so you can be aware of what's going on there. I think that's the Maryland one. It might be the DC one that does that, but I used to subscribe to both because in this area, because the DC Maryland line is so close. You could be working in DC but living in Maryland, or you could be working in both DC and Maryland and living in either DC or Maryland, if that makes sense. So if you work in foster care, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be working in both DC and Maryland because of where the foster homes are placed. And so you're probably going to have to be licensed in both areas. So keep that in mind. If this is a profession you want to pursue here in this area, is that you're probably going to have to be dually licensed, meaning you have to pay all those fees for both areas and keep those licenses up. What a lot of organizations do is pay for you to keep your license up. Not all organizations, but some do. So when you do your interviews, make sure you ask that question because that's very supportive if they pay those fees. $260 or $230 is expensive to maintain a license, even though you only pay it every 2 years. Just imagine having to pay for 2. Or with me, when I first started out, I was licensed in all 3 states. So the state I was born and raised in, South Carolina, and then also Maryland and DC. So it got
Virginia, or no, not Virginia.
No, I never worked in Virginia, but some people are licensed in all 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
I would have to be.
So also thinking about young people, let's go even younger. So high school. So what skills should people be focusing on building if somebody's in high school or middle school and they think maybe this is a career that might be for me? What are some key skills that they should be looking to acquire?
Being just a natural helper. If there's opportunities in your school to volunteer to help out with a committee or a group, volunteer and help out with them. If there are opportunities for you to be a part of an organization that helps underprivileged communities or groups, be a part of those organizations so you can do that type of work. Any type of volunteer work where you're working with a nonprofit organization, would be something that would be a good idea for you to look into. I know some students are candy stripers, even though that's in a hospital and you're, more so helping like patients or nurses, is still a helping profession, or a helping opportunity for you to be able to see what that's like, because you're more so not only just giving of yourself physically and working, but you're also giving of yourself mentally, and so it's a different type of profession. So if you feel like when you're volunteering in those areas, that's something you're passionate about and that you love to do, you should pursue that, as a career. But also keep in mind that social work is not the only helping profession. Librarianship is also a helping profession, and there's many others. And they help in different capacities. So figure out which capacity is right for you, really, before maybe going to school for it. Also, if you have the opportunity to shadow somebody, maybe shadow a social worker working in a various environment, that would be a great opportunity for you to understand the field or the profession better. I know for me, I really started to understand what it meant to be a social worker when I got to the internship stage. I didn't really have opportunities to shadow or be under a social worker in any aspect of my life prior to going to school. So I wish I would have had those opportunities,
right,
to see what it's like.
It seems like one of those professions where no amount of schooling will actually prepare you for the job. It's one of those things where teaching's the same way. You can take all these classes in the world, and it's really sink or swim when you get into the classroom. So I would think, as a social worker, shadowing somebody, might be good, but there might be certain things that they're not able to show you, or certain things that kind of are held a little more tight. So I would think it's just one of those things where you get into the field and you do a lot of your learning on the fly.
Yes, a lot of it. And I'm hoping one day that the licensing procedures can reflect that, because right now it's just a test. You go, you sit and take a multiple choice test. If you pass it, you get the license and you get to do the job. But really, this job entails experience, on the job experience. And hopefully one day, the licensing board will take that into consideration and maybe rethink the test a little bit. Part of the reason why I got out of it was because I did excellent. I, passed the graduate exam. But when I got to the clinical exam, I struggled. I took it several times and didn't pass because I'm not the best test taker. I'm more of an experienced, hands-on person. Just even like someone asked me that question, malingering, that's a question on the test, but that just, the definition doesn't come to me like that because I don't think that way. But if you ask me the question with regard to experience, I can talk to you about it all day. And so the test does not reflect that at this point, but I'm hopeful, in the future that it will. Because right now with COVID, they could probably use a lot more clinical social workers or more experienced social workers. And so because the barrier for the test is there, they don't have those social workers in place as far as the clinical side is concerned. So it all has to do with diagnosing. And that's going to be important as we move through this pandemic. Is there's going to be people who need to be diagnosed and need treatment, but because we don't have the social workers that have the clinical license, that may not occur as rapidly as it could have if we had the social workers.
Gotcha. So parting wisdom, Shannon, last question. Why should these teenagers who are watching, or who are hopefully watching, consider a job in social work?
I think with the state of what's happening in the world right now, that's the biggest motivator. We need more people who are readily available to help people who are going through traumatic times. I'm pretty sure that we will feel the effects of this pandemic for years to come. And so we need a dedicated group of individuals who are willing to step in and help people. The young people that are coming through this generation, to me, are very caring. They care about the effects of the environment, the world, and they are going to be game changers for us. So if you feel like you are that game changer and you want to help people and you are really excited about trying to support people as they improve their life, jump into this profession head on, and you will have one of the greatest experiences of your life. So hopefully I've encouraged you to try to go forward with it.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. You've offered wonderful perspective and context to a field that is often misunderstood and confused. So thank you so much for joining us. Today, I just want to do a super quick share with one of our online resources that we have from PGCMLS. So Shannon, we've been talking about young people in jobs and how to get into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So on our website, we have an online resource called Brain Fuse Job Now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a wealth of information. And the way that you would get to it from our site is it's in our online library, online resources, or you can come down here and get to it that way. And I'll expand my screen a bit. Sorry about that. Okay, and what we would want to do is search for Brain Fuse Job Now. We can either search alphabetically or by category. And this one in particular would fall under the jobs and career, and Brain Fuse Job Now is right here. You have to enter your library card number. So if you give me just a moment, I will do that. But it is really a wonderful resource. And I'm going to put a link right here into the chat. We did a 20 or 30-minute demo yesterday where we focused entirely on Brain Fuse Job Now. So if you're interested, if you're a teenager, or if you have kids that you're trying to kind of give a little oomph and have them start thinking about careers, definitely encourage you to check out this resource. Shannon, from your experience in the libraries, you said a lot of people come in to search for resources. Are they job resources? Are they just informational resources? Can you give us a little bit of an idea of the types of resources that folks are looking for?
Well, the biggest one right now is taxes. So they may come in and try to figure out, is there someone that offers support with getting their taxes done? We've offered, I think PG Community College, they do free appointment based type of service for taxes. I'm not sure how that's going with COVID happening, but there's also people who come in that are looking for jobs. They need help with their resume. Our digital resources are very helpful in that they can just put in their information, and in the template, it creates the resume, or they could talk to a job coach. So we've connected people to our job coaches online. There's people that come into the library who need housing assistance. So we've had the PG County social worker available on a weekly basis to provide housing support. We've had someone in from the Census Bureau with people trying to fill out the census or needed support with trying to get a job. I know the census was offering jobs for people to be census takers. So that was really awesome to have them there and be able to quickly talk with customers to see if they qualified for that position. We've had people come in and ask questions about how they can get support with childcare in the area, which is something social workers usually deal with. I've had to connect people with different resources in the county for that. Food, some people need to find resources for food. Some of our branches are located in what's called food deserts. So there's not a lot of places for healthy food choices. So sometimes we have to navigate that for parents and for customers. And then some kids during the summer come, for summer lunches. So we've offered the summer lunch program, which is typically something, that social workers or social service organizations would offer. So the library is really trying to do their part with regard to supporting people, with regard to needs as far as social services are concerned.
Right. Absolutely. And once again, Shannon, thank you so much for being with us and for enlightening us on this very deep topic of social work. We definitely appreciate you all. We appreciate you, the viewers who have been tuning into our virtual programs each and every day. Please make sure to check our website. We're constantly offering more. And if you do have any suggestions for what you want to see offered, you can always get in touch with us again through our Contact Us page. And you mentioned that people need help pretty much in every facet of life, Shannon. So something that we added just yesterday to our services for the library is we now have a call center. You can call us between certain hours of the day. I'll show you that real quick, and that'll kind of be how we close the session off. But it's something that we've kind of been looking to add for a little while, and we finally got to the point where we are able to offer that. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. And please tune into our website for our listing of virtual events. And right here, we've got our brand new telephone reference service available. And it's available from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we hope that if you all need help, you find somebody that you're comfortable reaching out to, and that can be us. So keep us in mind as you kind of tackle some of the troubles that you're dealing with and we're all dealing with at this time. So thank you, Shannon, and thanks to everybody for tuning in with us today. We appreciate you all so much.